So in this particular section, we're going to go back to our form and we're going to add a helper package to help us with the form filling, because if we were to do this all with native React code, then it's going to take us a lot of work and we'd be writing quite a lot more code, especially when we take a look at things like validation. This is where helper libraries such as Formik that we're going to use really do help us write a lot less code for common tasks like forms. And of course, forms are going to be a part of any application. And the headline for Formik is build forms in React without the tiers. Not that we had any tiers in our small effort earlier on to demonstrate basic forms in React, but as soon as you get slightly more complicated, then it's a good idea to reach for a forms library such as this one. And as they boldly claim, Formik is the world's most popular open source form library for React and React Native, and it is great. I did actually use a different forms library for the earlier version of this course, but I have grown accustomed to using Formik, and in my opinion, it's literally the best forms library for React. So this is what we're going to be using to build our forms. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and install this. And we'll go set it up and see what it gives us. And what we'll do is we'll go to our terminal. And we want to be inside the client app. Don't forget to do this. And we're just going to say npm install Formik. And this library is written in TypeScript, so we don't need to install any additional dependencies or the TypeScript definition file. So once this is installed, it's on version 2.2.6. and it's installed successfully. So we're going to go to our activity form. This is where we're going to be working from for most of this particular lesson or this section. And what we have so far is our earlier effort where we got React to control what's going on in the inputs by using this handle input change function. And we've got our handle submit, and we've got some form inputs, text area, we've got a date input, we've got a category option, but this is just plain text at the moment. We're going to want this to be a select, etc. But what we'll do first of all is we'll just take a very brief look at Formik and see what we can do with it, really. So what we'll do first of all, though, is we're going to comment out all of this code. The handle submit and the handle input change. We're just going to comment these out and ignore them for the time being. And what we're going to do, we're going to come down into our form, and just below the segment here, we're going to add the Formik component into our app. So we should be able to get the auto import. This has been behaving brilliantly so far in this course. I'm going to touch wood to make sure I don't jinx it, but so far the auto import has been doing a great job. So well done VS Code, by the way, for fixing that rather annoying problem over the last few years where that wasn't the case. So we're going to bring Formik in, and we should have the import for Formik added to the top of our file here. So what Formik needs, it's got some required props. And it tells us it needs, at the very least, the initial values and the onSubmit. So we'll give them those values. And the initial values in this case is going to equal the activity that we're going to continue to get from our local state. And we'll also give it an onSubmit method. What do we want to do when we submit our form? Now for the time being, we're just going to log out to the console just until we're happy that we've got our form set up how we want it. So we'll say values, or we'll get the values and we'll just pass them into a console.log statement. Now what we do next is we still are going to be using our form, but what Formik provides for us is render props. So we'll open up some curly brackets and then parentheses and then additional curly brackets to destructure the properties that we're interested in getting from Formik. Now we want to get the values, and these render props get passed down to our form. So the first one's going to be the values. Then we want the handle change, which is a function that we get from Formik, which is going to handle the input changes, whereas we had our own function here earlier on. We're going to make use of the Formik function to do this. And we're also going to pass down the handle submit function, again, that we get from Formik, as the props that we're going to pass down to the child component here. So after the closing parentheses, we'll add an arrow, and then we'll open parentheses again, and we'll cut our form in its entirety, and we'll just paste it inside the render here, where we're rendering our child component of Formik, which is of course our form. So what we'll do just to test this is we'll swap our handle input change for the handle change we get from Formik. So we want to change all of these handle input changes to the handle change, and what we can do, we can press Ctrl D to select the word, or Command D if you're on a Mac, and then we can press Command Shift and L, which is going to select all of the same words, or Ctrl Shift and L if you're on Windows, and we're going to swap this for handle change. And now Formik is taking care of the onChange events for all of our inputs. And what we should be able to do, and in fact what we do need to do, is use the values that we get from Formik that we're passing down here. So we need to tell our values to be known as our activity that we're passing down in the initial values, and that way all of our values in the inputs don't need to be updated. So we can just use the activity there for our values, and values is something that we get from Formik, so we need to specify this as values, but we're going to use activity inside the component here. Now what we've done here is not changed anything really. All we've done is swapped out what we had earlier with Formik functionality. We're using the handle change and we're using the handle submit from Formik because our form on submit function is still using the same name that we used earlier for handle submit. So let's go and take a look at our form and see what we've got from doing this. And we'll just go across to our app, and if we click on create an activity, and let's just open up the console and click the console. Obviously we'll see some warnings about unused imports just now, but we'll just ignore them for the time being. And if we start typing into these fields and click submit, we can see that we still get the values output inside here. Cool. How about if we edit an activity? Have we lost any functionality there? So if I click on view and then click on manage, well, the first problem is that we've never actually specified the link to take us there. So we'll add a link to our manage event first of all, and we'll go back to our activity detailed header for this. And we need to add a link to our manage event button. So we'll specify as equals link, which we'll get from React Router, and we'll say to equals, and then we'll add the expression, the backticks, and we'll say / and manage, and then $, and then activity.id. And let's go back across to our browser. Let's just refresh the page. And if we click on manage event, well, that's a bit disappointing. We don't see our activity inside here. But Formik has another trick up its sleeve, and if we get our activity after the component's initialized, then Formik has a switch here called enable reinitialize, and this will reset the form when the new initial values changes. So after the initial values is populated in our state initially, and then it gets updated with the use effect, then we need to specify the enable reinitialize so that the activity gets updated when that value changes. So we should be able to go back now and see our form populated. Let's just go back to the activities, let's click a different activity and click on manage, and we can see the new details inside there. And if we just open up the console once again, and we make a change and we go ahead and submit, then we should see the details of our activity inside here. And we see all of our properties. Excellent. So what did we achieve there? Well, we didn't really change the amount of code that we're writing for this. So what we'll do in the next lesson is take a look at how we can use Formik and write a bit less code. And we'll look at that next.